بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل هو الله أحد الله الصمد لم يلد ولم يولد ولم يكن له كفوا أحد.
Hello and welcome to Islamic Civilization, this time session 26 that deals with science and philosophy in Islam. So let's see what we have in terms of objectives for this session. Science in Islam, reconciling revelation with rationalism, that is what we are going to be talking about. Muslims appreciated and utilized scientific achievements of previous civilizations, and Muslims' approaches to philosophy. First they avoided it and then they adopted it. So from avoidance to adoption, Muslim approaches to philosophy. The geohistorical background for the study of science and Islam, let's see that. Science and philosophy in Islam. The Quran is the holy book of Islam, as you already know that. And it says, say, travel through the earth and see what was the end of those who rejected the truth. That is a verse from the Quran. And then the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, reportedly said, he was reported to have said this, seek knowledge even unto China. So both in the Quran, the holy book of Islam, and in the Hadith, these reports that, what the Prophet told his people at that time, in both books, the Quran and Hadith, you come with a lot of these propositions and recommendations, and in some time, like an order that knowledge is the best thing that you can get. So seek knowledge. As you saw, according to one hadith, seek knowledge even if you have to go to China. I mean, at that time, of course, sitting in Mecca and Medina, China was, the far end of the whole world. It was East Asia, and, so it was very far away. So even if you had to go that far as China, go and seek knowledge. Interestingly, at that time, China was under the Tang dynasty at the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him. So the Tang dynasty, very powerful, and it was known for a lot of knowledge, education, and one of the most successful dynasties, in China. And so that's why China was already known in the region, in the Middle East, as a place for knowledge, as a place for, trade and business, and that's what Arabs did. Even before Islam's, Arabs would go as far east as they could. But now the Prophet encouraging them, if you go there, you also should get knowledge, seek knowledge even unto China. Similarly, the Quran is also, it gives you a lot of these commandments, sometimes recommendations, sometimes just, encouragement that knowledge is the best thing. According to another saying, knowledge is the lost inheritance of the Muslims. So, I mean, phrases and sentences and propositions and encouragements like these put Muslims in the mindset that ignorance is bad. In fact, the only difference between the pre-Islamic Arabia and the post-Islamic Arabia is a terminology that Muslims use till this day, and scholars of Islam also use it, that is called Jahiliyyah. Jahiliyyah means ignorance. So the period that Arabs lived in the Arabian Peninsula, that period before Islam, that period is called the period of Jahiliyyah, the period of ignorance. And the one that came after Islam or with Islam, that was light, that was knowledge, that was education. And as I told you in previous sessions, that the first commandment in the Quran that came to the Prophet was Iqra, read, or for that matter, recite. And so in the first 5 verses in the Quran, there is the mention of reading and writing, knowledge. And the source of knowledge is God himself. There is also the mention, as I told you, the mentioning of pen, qalam. Pen is also, mentioned in the first 5 verses of the Quran. So this gave a lot of sort of encouragement to the Muslims to go and seek knowledge. And most of that knowledge that they sought was the knowledge that would benefit them, not a useless knowledge. And so if you engage yourself in something, serious as acquiring knowledge, then it should be the one that would benefit you and the rest of the community. So that is a sort of a background in which Muslim jumped into science and philosophy. Let's see, but there is a historical background, as I said, for all this. Let's see further. Science and philosophy in Islam. Early Muslims in the Arabian Peninsula, they mostly focused on theological doctrines and practices of Islam. That was, the beginning of Islam, and surely they had to, make sure that the theological doctrines and the practices were put in place and established. They defended their territories against Bedouins and external enemies. That was also the case in early Islam. And the more they came in contact with external enemies, the more they created more contacts. And those contacts, of course, got them into conflicts with non-Arab peoples on the border of the Arabian Peninsula. So what it was, basically these great empires that we would talk about, like the Greek Byzantine Empire in the north, especially the Persian Empire in the east, they had their sort of clients among the Arabs, even among the Peninsula Arabs. They had clients, they had tribes, and they used to do business with them. But at the same time, they would use them against their imperial enemies. And so with the rise of Islam, that was also the case, that the Persians and the Greeks, when they came to know the rise of this, another force, so to speak, another religion, Islam, and very resurgent Islam at that, on top of it, at that. And so definitely the Greek Byzantine Empire and the Persian Sassanid Empire, they were not going to welcome the rise of another force, as we saw in previous sessions. And so both Greeks and Iranian used their client Arab tribes and mini states against Islam. And so the more Muslims responded to these external threats, the more they got into deeper and deeper in Iran and in Byzantine Empire, and the more they got deeper there, the more they came into knowledge of these civilizations. They are, yes, the enemies, but at the same time, enemy is a very powerful enemy. And let's see what, how they got all this power. So they had to study. And so the early Muslim, they studied the Greek civilization, they studied the Persian civilization, they studied the Egyptians in the Northwest. So let's see further in the presentation. So nations that surrounded the Arabian Peninsula, as you know from previous sessions, Persians and Indians in the east, Greeks in the north, and these were very powerful people, very knowledgeable people. Also Egyptians in the northwest, another greater, the best of the civilizations, if you ask me, right there. And very close to home, Egypt. So Arabs of pre-Islamic, time, they also had commercial contacts with the Persian Empire, the Byzantine, and the Indian Empire. So there were already contacts between the Arabs and the non-Arabs people surrounding them in the neighborhood. Centuries-old empires that I mentioned, the Greek, the Persians, and the Egyptians, They became parts and peoples of Islamic civilization because they were conquered. They converted to Islam, and that is how, you know, Islam spread out of Arabia. So that's why you have a lot of Persians as Muslims. You have a lot of Chinese Muslims. You have Indians, you know, as Muslims. So much so that there were so many Indians in the northwestern part of India that they demanded a separate state and nation of their own in the northwestern part. And so later on, the British colonial empire, they realized that yes, to achieve peace in South Asia, they had to divide India into two sections, Hindu India and Muslim India. And so that Muslim India is now known as Pakistan. So what I'm saying, all these people, of course, were not forced into Islam. Impossible. They converted to Islam for one reason or another reason, and then, you know, they brought their culture, their talents, their sciences, their, you know, whatever they had for thousands and thousands of years, and now they serve Islam with it, as we will see in a few minutes. Let's see further. So you have Arab Muslims. They became the custodians of the greatest, I mean, high culture and scientific achievements of these old empires. This is just amazing how Arab Muslims became so highly educated with the culture and scientific achievements of the old empires that now became parts and peoples of the Islamic civilization. The empires that I talked about, the Greek Empire, the Persian Empire, the Egyptians, and further, you know, east, to China and India. So Muslim, they highly valued knowledge. And that value of knowledge, of course, they got from the Quran and Hadith, and they appreciated very much that knowledge, whether it was coming from India or from Egypt, you know, did not make a big difference to them. What it was, seek knowledge wherever you can get it. And that is what it would trigger what is called the golden age of Islam from 750 with the rise of the Abbasid Empire to 1258 with the destruction of Baghdad and the seat of Abbasid Empire by the Mongols. So the Abbasid Empire in the Middle East that, lived or thrived between 750 and 1258, that created what's called the golden age of Islam, and it was based on basically on education, science and technology and philosophy. So Arabic, for that matter, became the first international language and brought together scholars and scientists from Spain in the west to India and China in the east. And so because you have so many places and people now coming to Islam, there had to be one language. So they were very much helped by international trade. The spread of knowledge was also helped by international trade. Here is something that is quite remarkable. All this golden age of Islam resembles so much to the modern age of the 21st century that we are living in. And I give you an easy example. If all the peoples in the world who had achieved these great scientific, achievements, for example, the Chinese, the Japanese, the Koreans, the Indians, and move further, east, the Persians, and then come to Europe, beginning with the Greeks and the Italians and, some North Africans, and move on further west to Spain and Germany and France. If all these people did not have one single language to talk about their achievements, it would have been very difficult for those scientific achievements to go across the borders. And so, thank God, there was one language, and that was English. And because of the rise of the British Empire in the world, as it was, in India, in 13 colonies, in the United States, in Australia, New Zealand, even parts of North Africa, especially Egypt. And so all these great pockets of population, so to speak, on planet Earth came under the influence of English language because of the British Empire. And this was, 19th century and 20th century. And the legacy of that 19th and 20th century British Empire in English language is still with us, to the extent that there are more people in India who can speak English than people in England. And you, of course, you can say, well, that's demography. England is a small place, you know, an island nation. It is only a couple of, millions people. And India is a huge, big population of 1 billion people. Yes, and that's the whole point, that the 1 billion population took the language of a foreign nation, foreign country with whom they did not share any race, no religion, no, you know, region or any, by stretch of any imagination, they did not have anything in common except the empire and the subjects, the British Empire and the subjects of India, the Indian people as subjects of the British Empire. And so the result was English was adopted there in India, a great achievement on part of, I would say, the English language itself, and they utilized it. Exactly in the same way, you know, now Italians and Chinese and Japanese, Greeks and Spanish and, you know, other nations of the world, they can easily communicate in the international language of English, that is it. And so they can spread knowledge, they can talk to one another, they can go to conferences and, you know, come to know of another scientific achievement. And that is exactly what Arabic language was. It became the language of the 3 continents, Europe, Africa, and Asia. And you could be in China, a Muslim or non-Muslim, and if you wanted to sell your stuff somewhere in Africa or in Europe, or, you know, check out your ideology somewhere in Spain and vice versa, you could easily do that in Arabic and without becoming a Muslim, because Arabic was the language of already of so many European, especially Middle Eastern, North African Christians. Arabic was the language of the Jewish people in the Middle East. Of course, they had Hebrew, but, you know, not too many people in the region spoke Hebrew. So that obliged the Jewish people to learn Arabic, to have communication, you know, outside their own religious group. And so that's the reason Arabic, just as English is today the international language, Arabic became the international language of the Middle Ages based on education, knowledge, science, technology, and philosophy. And we would see more of that later on. Let's see further. Trade, travel also helped the spread of education from Spain to China. Staying with science and philosophy in Islam, and here comes, you know, something amazing. Baytul Hikmah, the house of wisdom, that was founded and flourished in the Abbasid Baghdad, modern day Iraq. Father and son Harun al-Rashid and Mamun al-Rashid, the 2 great rulers or caliphs of the Abbasid Empire, they created Baytul Hikmah. And it survived way after them from 9th century to the 13th century. It wasn't just a, you know, a place for only a certain period of time. You know, from 9th to 13th century, that was amazing. It was destroyed by the Mongols in 1258. And let's see what this Baytul Hikmah did. The people in Baytul Hikmah, they translated into Arabic books from Greek, Syriac, Persian, Sanskrit, and even Chinese. I mean, no European could speak Persian or Sanskrit, the sacred language of India, or Chinese language, and so, and vice versa. And all these languages and books in those languages were translated into Arabic, and now scholars, you know, who understood and could read and write Arabic, they could just, you know, learn Arabic, and they could get the Chinese mind, the Chinese knowledge, the Greek knowledge, Sanskrit knowledge, Persian, or Syriac knowledge. And so that's the, you know, the wonder that Arabic did. It involved not just only Muslims in the Baytul Hikmah, in the house of wisdom, but also Christians and Jews. They studied science for basically utilitarian reasons. You know, there was utility, that a purpose for which they, you know, studied science, and especially mathematics, astronomy, but not astrology. Think about it. Medicine, alchemy, chemistry, geography, and cartography. And these are very useful sciences because you need them on a daily basis. medicine, and mathematics on a daily basis. And so there was not really much to begin with. And so the greatest thing was that the Arabs, they brought together the knowledge of the Indians in the Far East, in a way, compared to Spain. If there was anything written by the Greeks about mathematics, about astronomy, about medicine, they brought all these, different sources into one source, Arabic. And from Arabic, anybody could translate anything that they wanted, if they could, there was a desire and the time and the money, and the will to do that, and they did that. A lot of Europeans, they translated great monumental manuscripts of the Greeks, not originally from the Greek, but from Arabic. Arabic, which was the translation of Greek, that Arabic was translated back into another European language, Latin. So now the Italians, or those people who could read and write Latin, they would read Greek stuff in Arabic and then translate it into Italian for further spread Greek knowledge among the Italians and other Europeans who could read and write Latin, because that was the lingua franca of Western Europe, as Greek was the lingua franca of Eastern Europe. And so Arabic was the lingua franca of the entire Mediterranean and beyond that. And so that is how different nations, they participated in it. Different scholars of different religions participated in the making this house of wisdom, Baitul Hikmah, so successful. And it there are studies, although we really do not know, but there could be books in thousands, not just huge big books, but books of small sizes, tracts and treatises that were translated. Anything that they could find, they would translate and get the benefit of it in terms of mathematics, medicine, astronomy. Speaking of astrology, astrology is a prohibited science or knowledge in Islam, in which most people across the nations and culture have used it to foretell the future, and that is prohibited in Islam even till this day. So there are palmists and here and there in the streets when you go to some Muslim countries, but most people, they do not go to palmists, they do not consult astrologers, and because that is prohibited in Islam, only God knows what is there for you in future. And so you will get what is coming, what is determined for you in future, and we will talk about that in terms of the philosophy in Islam also. Let's see further. So Baitul Hikmah, the House of Wisdom in Iraq, preserved enormous number of books and later destroyed by the Mongols in 1258. Some were translated in European languages, as I said. Mongol destroyed the House of Wisdom in 1258. And let's go to now the study of science. And to study science, you had to have a good rationale, the reason why you need to study this or that branch of knowledge, whether that is mathematics, medicine, astronomy, geography, cartography. As I said, everything was based on its utilitarian use, and which means it had to have a certain purpose. It had to have some goodness to come out of it, to serve you in real life, to show you the direction toward wherever you are going in terms of astronomy, using the stars as your guide in the darkness of the night. Or for that reason, to study medicine, especially to study the different kinds of herbs and trees and grasses and crops, and what good you could get out of those crops beside eating them. Similarly, chemistry, what item to mix with another item to get a desired item, so to speak. And so chemistry, alchemia as it used to be called, and that's how all these words that you see, especially chemistry, these most scientific terminologies that we use left and right in English language, in fact, they come to us from Arabic language. And if you go, maybe you can do your own search just to know, what English terms are basically Arabic. And there is a sort of a rule of thumb, and that would be mostly those terms that had to do something with scientific knowledge. Medicine, just like in medicine later on, Latin would become very much strong language because Romans, they spent so much time, and energy and wealth in the study of medicine, and that's the reason till this day we have so much Latin terminology in medical sciences. So most of these terminologies that refer to scientific achievements and medicine, that come into English from Arabic language. And so that's why you can do your own search to see what Arabic terms and words entered into English language. Let's see further what we have in the presentation. Science in Islam. So you had to have a good purpose to study whatever you are going to study. There is a religious background for this. And when we talk about science in Islam, Muslim did not see any discrepancy, any difference between, and that was the wonderful thing that encouraged them to do more science, between the Quran and the universe. I mean, of course, you can say, one is the holy book of religion and the other is the universe, a matter of physics and chemistry and whatnot. But yet, Muslim did not see any difference, any discrepancy between the Quran and the universe. And the reason was because they believed the Quran was the word of God, revelation, and the universe was the work of God that used reason. And so they did not see any discrepancy, any difference between the word of God, that was Quran, and the work of God, that was the universe, because universe was created by the same creator who gave us the Quran. And so therefore there should not have been, and there was no problem between revelation and reason, rather they went hand in hand. And so the study of the Quran was religion as it is today. If you study any holy book, that would be religion. And the study of the universe was and is science. So for Muslim, there was no problem, no difference, no conflict in science and religion. These were to them just two sides of the same coin. Both were created by God, both were guided by God, and so you were safe to approach science through religion and even religion through science. So that was the background for Muslims, why they felt so encouraged to study science, and that was the Quran itself. The second thing is the practical use of scientific knowledge. And there is something to that also in the Quran where, and Muslim, they pray and ask God, give me knowledge which is beneficial. And so here, look at this, the use of compass to find the Qibla. Qibla is the direction to Kaaba, which is in Mecca, which is in Saudi Arabia, and Muslim pray 5 times a day. And so if you are in the high ocean or somewhere in the desert or anywhere, in the mountains or the valleys, before you pray, you need to find the direction to Mecca, which is called Qibla. So compass, and that was the wonderful thing that Muslims adopted and improved. The use of paper by Muslims for writing and reading the Quran and Hadith, and for that reason, for any, that would be true of any religion. And so here, that was the greatest use of paper for religious purposes. The use of water for washing, for prayers. As you know, Muslim pray 5 times a day, and then before every prayer, they wash the body parts, hands, face, and feet. And so anything that had to do with washing also became science. There you see the study and the sermons, or rather the lectures and the sessions that the great masters would have. And so the institution on the right side, as you see, students listening to their master or to their teacher or instructor, whatever you call them, and some people call their teachers, of course, master. And so if you look at the background in the right image, you see stacks of books. And that is just only one place with a few people and having those many books. And that is, there were, in fact, in Iraq especially, later on also in Egypt and also in Syria, wherever Islam spread, you would see the rise of an institution to be called madrasa. Madrasa is the religious school, or for that reason, even the scientific school, where people, Muslims especially, they could come together and learn not only the religious sciences, how to pray, how to wash, how to give zakat, the charity, how to fast during the Ramadan. Not only that, but also how to find a place on planet Earth, how to go and do this or that, something which related to the mundane and to the material world rather than to the spiritual and religious. But anyway, all these, the secular or the material world was very much in tune with the religious world. And so there, the Sheikh, the great scholar, was there to help you. He had the knowledge and he would give you that knowledge. And so that is how the institution of madrasa, that later on would become the universities in Europe, started with Iraq, in Egypt, and Syria. I must say also that this type of a institution already existed among the Greeks, the academies, the schools that were known. And so when Muslim came into power, and they came into power in these places, when the Muslims converted, they brought that institution of teaching and learning in a specific place to be called academy or madrasa or school, continued in Islam. It did not stop in Islam. Rather, it was more encouraged and more developed in Islam. And that's why Muslim got what is called the golden age of Islam from 750, mid-8th century, to 1252, which was destroyed, by the Mongols. We don't know, it would have continued, God knows, to what extent. Let's see further. Hunayn ibn Ishaq, a mid-9th century, scholar, known to European as Johannitus, Latin. He was Arab-Iraqi Nestorian, Nasara. He was a Christian, an Iraqi Christian, and you should not be surprised even today if you go to Iraq, there are Iraqi Christians, although it's a majority Muslim country, but still there are Christians in Iraq. In fact, Saddam Hussein had quite a few wonderful Christian friends. One of them was Tariq Aziz, who was his left-hand man, and his prime minister, so to speak, and foreign minister. And he would go to United States or Russia, for at that time Soviet Union, and any other place, and would fight the case of Saddam Hussein in different countries. Later on, he was captured, but then I believe there was some sort of a settlement. Maybe you can find out what happened to Tariq Aziz, the right-hand man of Saddam Hussein, and he was a Christian. So Christian in Iraq, very powerful people, very knowledgeable people, highly educated people, and having great connections between Iraq and the West and United States. Till this day, there are Christians in Iraq. Let's see. So he was, Hunayn ibn Ishaq was Iraqi Christian. He worked in the House of Wisdom. He spoke Arabic, Greek, Syriac, and Persian. And he was not the only one, who was able to speak different languages, Arabic being the mother tongue, but they could speak Greek and Syriac and Persian. And Iraq had that type of a tradition even before the rise of Islam in Iraq. So he was also a great prolific translator in Arabic. He translated a lot of books into Arabic from Greek, Syriac, and Persian. And there you see him, Hunayn ibn Ishaq, much more known for, the study of the eyes, the study of the brain. Just amazing in those days that one could also, make a diagram of the, inside of the eye. And there you have him, you know, a mid-9th century scholar of medicine, and not just only medicine, but also mathematics. And these were, boy, they knew so much, you know, geography and astronomy also. Here is, you know, people say he abided by the Hippocratic oath. This oath that was associated with a great scholar, a philosopher and mathematician and medical practitioner, Hippocrates in ancient Greece, who lived from 360 to 370 BC. I think it should be the other way around. Check the date on that individual Hippocrates for yourself. I see something is wrong with the date. So Hunayn ibn Ishaq, and on the right you see a sort of a medieval age version, Christian Byzantine version of that oath. It is, you know, a medical oath that even till this day medical practitioners they take, and the oath is very simple oath that after graduation, the medical student upon graduation, now he is going to be medical, you know, practitioner. The oath is that he would not use his profession to harm people. He would use it only to heal the people. And because the medical practitioner, he knew, you know, different properties of different plants, different potions, even poisonous. And so when the caliph of the time, in the days of Hunayn ibn Ishaq, the caliph approached him and asked him to make a poisonous potion for him. And he asked him, what do you do with this? He said, I'm going to, you know, use it upon my enemy. And he said, I would never do this. I don't know how to make one. He lied first, and then he was jailed. You know, he was imprisoned, and then he was asked why you would spend your whole life in this prison, and why don't you make, you know, this portion for the caliph? He said he took the Hippocrates oath, which meant that he had, you know, he had promised with himself that he would heal people and not hurt people. So that's the story, you know, behind how he went to jail for nothing, just, you know, to refuse the caliph, the ruler, telling him, I cannot make this poisonous potion for you. I would rather go to jail. And that's, you know, he stood his ground on the principles of Hippocrates' oath. Let's see further. Ibn al-Haytham, another great philosopher and also physicist and a medical practitioner, best known for his book on optics, the book of optics. He studied Archimedes, also an ancient Greek scientist. And there he admired, on the left you have Ishaq, and on the, on the right you have Archimedes. And there, you know, he even proved that Archimedes burnt the Roman ships by using mirrors, you know, and reflecting the sun on the ships, and that is how he burnt the ships of Romans. Whether that's true or not, but that's, you know, the story behind Archimedes and his great knowledge that he used to save his country, Greece, from the Romans. On the right, you have even Galileo. You know, he stands for sort of senses, whether the Muslim, you know, scholar, he stands for reason. So you could go online and check, you know, that debate, reason and senses, reason and faith, and how the Muslim won that debate. Medicine and surgery, very important. And there you have Abu al-Qasim al-Zahrawi, a mid-10th century person, early 10th century person, 11th century person, and he is called the father of surgery. And he has a list of, which is called Abu al-Qasis, because, you know, the Italian could not pronounce his name Abu al-Qasim, so they call him Abu al-Qasis. And so in 1531, one Italian person, medical practitioner, he published a list of Abu al-Qasim's surgical tools, and there you have, you know, his list of tools. Some people believe that they run into 50. These are only 20 or 21 tools. Other people collected his tools and they run into 50. So that, he must have done some very complicated or sophisticated surgeries. Let's see further. Medicine and surgery. And so on the left, what you see is basically a Greek manuscript turned into Arabic, translated into Arabic. So all that knowledge that was associated and the great properties associated with the plants were translated into Arabic. And on the right, don't do that at home anyway. So there is a Muslim surgeon operating whatever he's doing upon this horse, and I think the horse is very cooperative, it looks like. So they so not only on humans but also on animals they did operations, surgeries. Also on the left, this is believed to be the first anatomy, image of a human body that deals with bones, nerves, veins, blood circulation. The heart is missing though, coming up pretty soon after that. So it deals with at least 5 major aspects of the human body. And so before you know what to cut and the right image, the surgery just about to be performed. And so the medical practitioner, the surgeon, he had to know what he was doing inside the body. So that's here you have on the left the image of anatomy, and believed to be the first anatomy, and also the surgery, the first type of a surgery. Very complicated surgery that Muslims executed or achieved in the Middle Ages. And some of these surgeries and books would be used in Europe. Here Ibn Sina, 980 to 1037, his Canon of Medicine became a standard textbook in Europe until 1700s. And there his Arabic textbook Canon of Medicine was translated into Latin. And but then if you are Spanish, good luck, unless you could read and write Latin. And most scholars in Western Europe, they did read and write Latin. And that is how, as I said, so many Latin terms entered into medicine. Till this day, that is the case. So here you see Ibn Sina, his Canons of Medicine translated into Latin and used in Europe until 1700s. Astrolabe. You see that English, but that is basically Arabic term. To measure the heights, that was another great achievement, and a complication solved. Astronomy, the study of the stars, but study the stars on heaven, and so there they went together, the heaven and the earth, and quite a few places in the Muslim empires and dynastic empires, quite a few places were dedicated to the study of the heavens, the study of the star in terms of astronomy. Study heaven and earth. Al-Idrisi world map, an atlas, 1154. And so you see these scholars and in a library or a school which is full of books, if you look at their shelves, and there they study star and earth and everything in between. And on the right you have almost the first complete map by the Muslim scholar Al-Idrisi, published in 1154. The only thing is we use to our maps in which north is up. In this map, north is down, so south is up. So it gives you entire Mediterranean Sea. It gives you the Italian peninsula, exactly where it is, the Greek islands where they are, and also it gives you Egypt. So if you know where Egypt is and where Italy is, which is the center of Mediterranean Sea, and then you know where it opens in the west between Spain and Morocco, then you have complete knowledge of Mediterranean. And so from Mediterranean, if you use that, as the ancient geographer used to say, give me the Mediterranean and I can give you the world. And if you look at it, so look at the Mediterranean. To the north is mostly Europe, to the south is Africa, and to the east is Asia. And that is how Al-Idrisi used that knowledge, and he created the 3 continents around the Mediterranean. But the thing is, in our geographical conventions, we use north as up and you know, south is down and east is right and west is left. But in this case, in their convention, geographical conventions, south was up and north was down. So that's why North African continent is up, and Europe is down in south. Okay, maybe you should, you know, there are copyrights on this map. They say that you are most welcome to use it and publish it even, but do not change the directions. The south must stay up, the north must stay down. So do not change the direction. Maybe if you want to know, you know, where you can flip it, but when you publish it or use it in public, as I'm doing it, the south must stay north, and get used to it. Okay, let's see further. The use of astrolabes for measures, and boy, you know, wonderful inventions that the Muslims came with and used it. And of course, there was already, you know, the tradition among the Greeks for all these, but the Muslim, they adopted those traditions and perfected them to unbelievable heights, and there you see them. Okay, mathematics, very important. Here, one of the greatest mathematicians and geographer and astronomer, and also a person whom you could go for medical advice, Al-Khwarizmi, from 780 to 850. Al-Khwarizmi, it is from his name that you get the word, English word algorithms, okay, dealing with trigonometry. From the name of his book, the book of Algebra, from his book you get the name of, or the term of algebra. So from the author's name, Al-Khwarizmi, you get the word algorithms, and from his book title, Book of Algebra, you get the term algebra. If you don't like algebra, you can blame it on him. But there he is, and this is a Soviet Union recognition of this great man's, you know, mind, and the celebration of his life as a great mathematician. There is also a tradition among the Muslims why they had to go to such lengths to spend so much time on mathematics and algebra. And we are told one reason is very simple, as everything had to be utilitarian purpose, you know, driven. Math and algebra, they were driven by the need, the Muslim need of inheritance. And Muslim inheritance can be sometimes very complicated, because inheritance between man and woman is not exactly the same, and because the Muslim inheritance can be divided and the woman inheritance cannot be divided. Okay? So the Muslim inheritance, land, property, cash, they can be used. But the wife, cash, property, land, whatever, you know, stock, bonds she has, that cannot be touched. So within the family, what happens is the husband money is the wife money, and the wife money is also the wife money. So his money is hers money, and her money is hers money. So it becomes very complicated in terms of inheritance, in terms of the division of the assets. So for the, and rightfully so, because there is a tradition in saying that the knowledge of inheritance is 1/2 of the knowledge that there is. So in Islam, it's very complicated business, and so that's why, you know, mathematics and algebra was so much emphasized. And even today, if you go to a Muslim scholar and tell him, how can I divide, you know, after the death of our fathers, or even after my death, how this would be divided between my sons and children and wife and parents and brothers and sisters and uncles and aunties, and, you know, the list goes on. Okay, it's not your money, then it's the money that belongs to all these people, and each one has to have his own particular share, small or big. So for that reason, algebra came very handy, and that was the purpose driven science of mathematics and algebra. Let's see further. Muslim-Western connections, also, you know, a wonderful thing that happened in the Middle Ages. On the left, you see a great, you know, mathematician or scholar. He's giving a lecture in somewhere in Europe, and on the upper shelf above him, there is his books. And out of the 6 books, 3 or 4 belong to Muslim scholars and 2 or 3 belong to ancient Egyptian philosophers. Amazing. So the Muslims and the Greeks were put together in European libraries, in European houses of wisdom, so to speak. And so that was a wonderful thing for Europe later on to bring, Arabic and Greek together and have, even this type of a knowledge, Arabic knowledge, was used in the rise of what we call the Renaissance movement. And there are scholars of the Renaissance who really believe that without all this knowledge of Arabic, which was basically Greek knowledge, Europe would have been lost, and it would have lost all this great knowledge thanks to the Arabs who saved Greek knowledge for later on European to use it. The image on the right, what you have is basically emperor, the Holy Roman Emperor, Frederick II. Even if he had to fight Muslims in the southern Italian peninsula, still he loved to contact Muslims and bring them to his palace and ask them questions on medicine and mathematics. And he had a wonderful connection with Muslim scholars. And so there, that image, very important painting, and I thought I should share it with you. Let's see further. Islamic philosophy. And there also had to be some rationale for Islamic philosophy. The main purpose of Islamic rule was to create salam, peace, and establish justice, adl. Political rule and administration of justice, very important 2 aspects of human life. 3 of 4 caliphs, as you already know, they were murdered. So that means peace is very important. And so early Islam suffered from 3 civil wars, major civil wars that killed, thousands of Muslims. And the first political problem divided the Muslims into Sunni and Shia sectarian division. What I'm saying here, if you want to have philosophy, that philosophy should serve you in a better way to achieve peace. The Quran and Hadith, as I told you, were enough, for science, and now they were enough for philosophy. When it came to philosophy, they guided individual Muslims to achieve peace and justice in family and community. That could be achievable, on individual level. The spread of Islam and expansion of Islamic empire in distant lands, that made it very complicated to achieve peace and justice. And so that expansion of Islam in distant lands, from Spain in the west to China in the east, necessitated political philosophy, a philosophy that would achieve peace and justice in this huge big area of different cultures and different civilizations, different nations, who spoke different languages, practiced different religions. So Quran and Hadith guided the Muslims to, number 1, divine monotheism and human morality, very important. If Muslims stayed with the divine monotheism called Tawheed, and with human morality that Quran and Hadith taught them, that was enough for their entire life. And what it meant was worshipping only one true God. That is divine monotheism in Islam, Tawheed. And how to deal with fellow human beings, very important in Islam. Also, the touchstone of a Muslim life, sincere worship and humane dealing with the fellow human beings, which led a person to piety and sociability. Very important things. Even if a person achieves it today, he is in great shape. Common Muslims understood God through the Quran, yes. Having a personal relationship with God, that is what they, understood. That's why they avoided abstract, philosophical, speculative dabbling in divine nature. Boy, I'm throwing in a lot of words in it, but you know what I mean. And so most of the Greek philosophy, Persian and Hindu philosophies, they were products of the polytheist, not monotheist minds, and so they could not trust them, and that's why they avoided them. However, the Muslim world, as you see it, it was huge and big, as it is today. And so the expansion of Islamic empire in Eurasia Muslim scholars came in contact with Greeks, Persians, Indian philosophies. They critiqued non-Muslim philosophies. They appreciated Greek philosophers' emphasis on human rationalism. They loved it. And the reason is the Greek philosophy. However, they believed that divine revelation, that is the Quran, was the best guide. And if you had Quran, nothing could misguide you. But unfortunately, people do, out of curiosity, study other civilization, other culture, nothing wrong with it, as long as you stand on the firm ground of Tawheed, that is divine monotheism. Monotheism, belief in one God, the worship of this one God, Allah. As long as you have that and you be humane in dealing with other people, then you are fine. Read whatever you want to read. Let's see further. Philosophy in Islam. So, dear Muslim philosopher translated Socrates, his books in Arabic. That was just amazing that they did, and they definitely would do that. Muslim philosophers, they struggled with qadr. Human power can change life. That is what they believed. Human have choice of action, that is free will. You all know this. However, there was another theory, Jabr, divine force determines everything, which meant that God determines your fate, hence fatalism. You cannot really do anything about it. But both groups, they used revelation and reason. Okay. Different Muslim dynastic rulers, they used philosophy to legitimize their rule, not really a good thing to do. Some claimed even divine right to rule. God appointed me to rule you, not really good. They selected their heir apparent in large harems. They had their names mentioned in the Friday sermons. They punished anti-ruler uprising as anti-God. If you said something wrong to him, they said, well, you did something wrong to God. And so religion became servant of the ruler, a very common practice throughout humanity. To combat divine right to rule, some philosophers, they turned secular, away from the political use of religion. That is what meant to them, secularism. They turned more to Greek philosophy. Some philosophers reconciled, however, religion and revelation with rationalism. They reconciled prophecy with philosophy. They believed that both were the same and they could serve, human beings. Famous Muslim philosophers, I'm going to give you a list who reconciled revelation with reason: Al-Kindi, Al-Farabi. You can do, I think, an extra credit paper on any one of them of your choice. Okay. Al-Ghazali, he turned against the philosophers. And so I'm going to show you something wonderful. Averroes in the School of Athens by Raphael in 1511. And so at on the left side, you see Averroes, he's looking at, over the shoulder of Socrates. And so there you see the connection between Muslim and Greek philosophy in that great, wonderful image by Raphael. And so I think we did a lot. So let's see what we achieved in terms of the review. Muslim advances in science, utilitarian approach to mathematics, geography, astronomy, and medicine. You had to have a purpose. Muslim pioneer textbooks were used in Europe until 18th century. Muslim scholar translated and critiqued Greek philosophers' works. Of course, they would take it with their own religion. Reaction report number 26. Write brief notes on any one aspect that you like in in Islam, science and philosophy in Islam. Okay, be my guest. You have your own, choice. Stay engaged. Any question, any comments, go to Lavlima. Check your assignments and your messages. And so anything you want, just go to Lavlima and check with me. And thank you very much. Aloha.
بسم الله